cards that you received as you entered. Fill those out and just raise those up, and we will have a staff and we'll make sure they are answered by the appropriate person. And finally, those who are not in attendance, you can still provide comments and raise questions again on the City of Tulsa Facebook Live feed and also on the website again, which is www.cityofTulsa.org/1921 Graves. At this time, we'll have the invocation by Pastor Robert Turner of the historic Vernon AME Church.
Let us pray. Dear God, our holy and heavenly Father, creator of the universe, sustainer of all life, bless this proceeding. Bless those who are here and those that are on their way. We pray for the committee members and the presenters on tonight. We even pray, oh God, for the news and the journalists as they write reports on this, that you give them the wisdom to meticulously know what it is you have your people to know. God, we thank you for this wonderful blessing and opportunity to find those that have been discarded. And bless us, oh God, with your mercy to find each and every one. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend Turner. Next, we'll have an update on proposed test excavation. I'd like to carry some of that.
Good evening. So just to provide an update, excuse me, since our last meeting, we are closing in on finalizing our details with regard to the proposed excavations. We are anticipating a start date of April 1st with a proposed time frame of approximately 10 to 12 days. It may be less than that, but it shouldn't take more than that amount of time. We have amassed a team of folks from various organizations, from the Oklahoma Archaeological Survey, the OU Department of Anthropology, University of Tulsa, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner here in Oklahoma, University of Florida, and Florida Gulf Coast University, So we have a really nice team of people who are going to be coordinating on this particular effort. We are finalizing some of the excavation plans, working closely with the city's team from the asset management and streets and stormwater. So those are all things that are in progress and just kind of being finalized, but that's kind of where we are right now. Any other questions?
Do you know, is there a particular time of day on April 1st?
So the very first day, we're going to be, whether we do this, there's a couple things that we're talking about in terms of laying out the area where the excavation is actually going to take place. The question is, are we going to try and do that on March 30th or March 31st or in the morning of April 1st? So actual excavation, it might not start until perhaps like 10 a.m. If we go out on April 1st. The reason for that is, Scott Hammerstead and Amanda Renier are going to be continuing some of the geophysical survey work in a different portion of Oaklawn Cemetery that we talked about last time as well. They're going to come and help us set up the grid to make sure that we're tying in with the area where the anomaly was identified. It shouldn't take very long. So we're expecting the question right now, what we were originally anticipating was doing that at the very first part of the morning, starting at perhaps as early, we haven't really set the time, probably sometime around 8 a.m. on the 1st. That won't take very long to lay that grid out. So it's kind of hard to give a precise time of when the excavations will start, but it would be in that morning.
Can the community come?
Yes, and so we actually are going to have some discussion about that. I think Amy is going to talk about that. So.
Okay, so this is our last meeting before we work, so we do want to talk about some of those logistics. First of all, the cemetery is going to be completely closed during the test excavation to protect the integrity of the ground that will be opening. And so basically no one will be allowed into the cemetery except for our researchers, our tribal monitor, and our public oversight committee monitors. So we're going to ask the public oversight committee to work with Nick and decide what makes the most sense, whether that's one monitor who is inside the cemetery the whole time, monitoring the work that's being done, or whether that's something that's done in shifts. I think we can do some training, so if someone's interested in doing it and feels like maybe they need a little bit more expertise, we have people who will get you up to speed, so you can be an effective monitor if you're interested. And then other than that, the only individuals who will be allowed in the cemetery are security. That said, we're going to set up a viewing area on the trail right adjacent to the test excavation site. So we've been talking about bringing in some bleachers. We're going to have a restroom there. We're going to have a media area. So there will be public and media viewing from the trail, but the fence will protect the integrity of the excavation that's being conducted. In addition, we just wanted to remind and touch base for anyone who wasn't here last time that images, video, photography of human remains will be strictly prohibited. Basically, we want to ensure that this work is done in a way that ensures dignity for potential victims that we might be finding. So we're going to ask people not to take images or video of the work. And the last thing that I wanted to let people know is that the Oklahoma Archaeological Survey will be in town doing some work next week at the request of ODOT near Mount Zion Church. And so just wanted to let everyone know that's not affiliated with this work or this process, but they will be in town. So if you see their truck, know that it's not related to this work, it's some other work that they're doing for ODOT. I think that's all.
Amy, I think I heard you say monitors will be on site. Do we know who those are and how they would qualify to be a monitor?
So,
Question. What's the question?
so the question is, you heard that there will be monitors on site. Do we know who they will be and how does someone qualify? We've been working with the Muscogee Creek Nation. They've identified 2 individuals who are trained and will be serving as monitors. And then we're asking the Public Oversight Committee for someone or a group of people working in shifts to volunteer to be a monitor for the Public Oversight Committee. So we haven't selected that person yet. That's something we hope to ask for this evening.
We just sign up or talk amongst ourselves?
I think we'd be open to some feedback from the committee, whether you think that's one person you would like to designate or whether you're interested in that being a group of people. And then I think, Nick, we can work together to facilitate a sign-up. I will say Dr. Odawale from University of Tulsa is a member of the Physical Investigation Committee and the Public Oversight Committee. She's already committed to be doing the field work, so there's an opportunity to have another monitor in addition to Dr. Odawale.
Another question. So if it rains, how does that stop anything, or is there going to be a tent that's over that site, or what?
Yes, there will be a tent, and we've made some plans for basically hay bales, tarps, other ways that we can manage water in case of weather. I think obviously weather work continues, just depends on the severity of weather, and so we're going to put preserving the integrity of the site first. But we have been planning equipment-wise to make sure we're prepared for rain, wind, snow, whatever Oklahoma weather may bring. Yeah.
And to better do shifts, do we know like the hours that they're gonna be out there?
Approximately.
Yeah, it's gonna be approximately an 8 to 5 day.
We've also discussed having a daily briefing at 8:30 a.m. every morning, so that there will be an opportunity for media, public to hear a daily update. They'll brief on, what happened the day before and what the plans are for the day. That way, our researchers aren't having to take unplanned, unscheduled breaks all day long for media requests or to answer questions. Because once we open this hole in the ground, we want to make sure that we're doing the work efficiently so that we're protecting whatever we're uncovering and then able to recover it. So the plan right now is to have daily briefings at Tracy Park, which is just to the south of Oak Lawn Cemetery. There's parking there, so it'll be easy for people to get in and out. And do a daily briefing about 8:30 every morning. We'll confirm this with all of you. And then allow the researchers to work throughout the day.
Can you list those names again? You said a native monitor, and who else will be a part of that small monitoring group?
Sure. So our physical investigation committee, the researchers from University of Oklahoma, University of Tulsa, University of Florida. I think I'm forgetting one.
Florida Gulf Coast.
Florida Gulf Coast, thank you. Our public oversight committee monitor, tribal monitors, and security.
Should we find the remains, what would be the protocol? Would everything stop at that moment, or is there
I
a
think
protocol?
that's a scary question.
So the plan at this point, we're not, I can say that. You want me to say that?
Carrie, would you move the computer up there so Phoebe can see you all? She can only see the side of your head. There you go.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Phoebe.
Right, so we're not proposing to do any exhumations at this point in time, but what we do want to try and do if we do encounter remains is to expose them in sufficient detail as to allow the forensic and physical anthropology team to be able to make as many observations as possible without having to remove them. So there will be some limitations to that, and Phoebe can speak to this as well if you want to chime in, Phoebe. But we would be leaving them, the idea would be to pedestal and leave them in place and document in place before we would then ultimately recover those remains in a fashion that would allow us to come back in at a later date. If we do identify remains that appear to be consistent with potential race massacre victims, the idea here is to try and compile information so that we can lay out a better plan, more appropriate plan for that larger effort and the exhumation process at a later date. So any exposure we would do at this point would be very careful, and documentation, we would be very careful with all of that documentation. Then we would recover those remains and do so in a fashion that allows us to then re-excavate them at a later date. Did you want to add anything to that, Phoebe?
Yes, I mean, everyone can still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so we're doing this two-step process because we don't actually know if there'll be remains, and if there are remains, which I strongly hope, we don't know whose remains. So we don't want to remove anything, any skeletal material, until we have an idea that they're victims from the race massacre. And as part of that, it's not just about time and energy, but it's just part of paying respect to people who have been interned. Well, I do hope that, because that's an unmarked area, and at the very least, I would hope we'll provide some information about who those individuals are, assuming they are there, so that we don't leave an unmarked burial. I also don't want to risk damaging remains by lifting them out of the ground and then find out they're not related and then put them back. And this way we'll have a two-step process. This way we'll at least know should we invest further. Any other questions I can help with? I'm sorry I'm not there with you all. I'm just trying to conserve our resources, monetarily.
With the pre-work that you plan to do in the ultimate excavation, how long of a process do you think that will take or be?
Right, so we are planning right now, we've kind of blocked out a time period of, we believe it can be accomplished within 10 days, maybe 12 days maximum. It really shouldn't take longer than that. We are going to start with removing some of the overburden using heavy machinery very carefully. I know it's kind of scary to contemplate this, but this is a a technique that's utilized quite frequently in forensics and also in archaeology, just to remove the upper portion of soil, just because that's much more efficient, much quicker than if we were excavating all of that by hand. So we'll remove the first few feet by heavy machinery, and then we would take over by doing removal of soil by hand excavation. So that's a bit of a slower process. We expect the heavy machinery work to be completed within 1 to 2 days maximum. And then coming in with the archaeologists principally doing the hand excavations, an additional, this is where it's kind of difficult to estimate because it depends on the point at which we would then start to encounter human remains. The point at which we start to encounter human remains, everything gets that much slower. The deeper we get, the slower and more careful everything gets. So, but we do estimate that it won't be longer than about 10 days to complete the whole process.
So Carrie, those who come the first 2 days will see a lot of the bulldozing, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so April 1st and 2nd is when we would have the track excavations, yes. Mhm.
How large is the test excavation site?
So we're still kind of working out some of these details, and there's a couple of different reasons for this and why I don't have a solid answer tonight, because there's 2 different ways that we can approach this. Excuse me. The approximate area that we want to expose and try and maximize this effort, because we're putting a lot of resources into this. We want to get as much information as we can at this point in time. So the excavations can either happen with just basically excavation of kind of an 8 by 10 block straight down. And then there would be shoring that would be put in place to basically accommodate a safe space for us to be in during the excavations. And so that shoring would be put in place to hold back the dirt, essentially, so that we would be then out in the hole excavating down in that 8 by 10 area approximately. So that is one possibility. Another possibility, but that gives us a pretty small window because that's 8 by 10 feet, but we have to have workspace where people can be seated while they're actually reaching in to do the excavations by hand. So that doesn't give us a very big window. So we can do it that way. Another way that is kind of more typical and along the lines of what I showed the photographs of from the comparative example in the last meeting is where you step it in kind of that inverted pyramid where we have benches that are cut down until we get down to the depth that we need to. That would allow us to open up a larger space, approximately 2 by 3 meters, so about 6.5 by 10 feet roughly. So that gets us a bit more exposure in that central area and would also get us more data potentially. But it comes with risks because we're having to move more dirt in the overburden, and so there's a possibility that we could encounter remains that we're not currently anticipating that may not have anything to do with the race massacre in that overburden, in that overlying area. So those are the 2 things that we're kind of weighing out right now in terms of which of those approaches makes the most amount of sense and is the most appropriate approach.
So will that decision be made that day, or you'll?
No, we're we're actually, those are just some things that this is just in terms of meeting with some of the city staff who are actually going to be assisting with that element of the excavations. We were just meeting with them about that this afternoon. So that's going to be a decision. That'll be probably this week when we make that decision.
Yes, ma'am. After the excavations begin and you determine that there remains of race riot victims, will there be any security provided for the site?
I think that may be a good question for Amy. Right now, there definitely is security for the site, and maybe you can talk about how that would continue.
Sure. So without going into too much detail, there's going to be joint security. So the City of Tulsa has non-sworn security who already are monitoring the cemetery. They will be providing security throughout the excavation. Also, if we determine that there are human remains there, we are going to have a sworn law enforcement security presence so that we can maintain that evidence chain of custody for those remains. So there's a lot more details, but without going down into the weeds, the answer is there will be both kinds of security, and additionally, the site is under 24/7 video surveillance that is monitored 24/7.
So once the excavation process is completed, how long will it take for us to receive some type of documentation reporting on that, more or less?
So that's a really good question. And so that may depend on what it is that we actually discover, and it is something that Phoebe and I would be expecting to kind of like, we'll be able to have some summary results that we can present to the committee and the public very quickly. I mean, we'll be doing the daily briefings, but then we'll also have a quick summary at the close of the excavations. That won't take too long to actually provide that. We would like to actually though produce a more detailed report of the results, and that would be something that I expect Phoebe and I and some of the other team members will be working collaboratively to try and produce that document. That might take a little bit more time, but we would have a better sense at the end of this about how long it would take to actually produce that document.
Good. Those summaries will be good as you go along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so absolutely, and having that daily briefing, that's, we really have to be able to convey whatever we're learning, we'll tell you each of those days.
Got a question.
Mm-hmm.
You said the excavation will be decided on within city staff. Who within the city staff are experts on excavation, excuse me?
So the process of excavation, this is basically where we're coordinating with them to complete the heavy machinery work. I'm not a bulldoze operator. I don't do the heavy machinery. Much as I wish I was cross-trained in that regard, I'm not. But that's where, so we have city staff who, that is their job, and as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Terry, but the person who will actually be doing it is one who actually works in the cemetery and is already excavating graves, but doing so in a different fashion. And as I understand, they're actually practicing the skills that we want them to employ now, because it's a different type of work. When you're working, most times when you have people who are working backhoe operators are used to going in and they want to get the job done as quickly and efficiently as possible. So they have a toothed bucket, and usually time is of the essence. So as quickly as they can dig as much as possible, that's their goal. We're asking them not to do that. So in this case, they're going to be working with a bucket that has a straight edge, so it will create a flat surface. We're also asking that they don't aim for digging as much as possible, as quickly as possible. Slow is the game. So it'll be just a few inches at a time that they cut down and clear back. And then the monitors, so those of us that will be there doing the archaeological monitoring from the physical investigation team, that's where we'll be closely watching. And each time they take a swipe, and remove that bit of soil, we're going to be looking for any kind of changes in soil color, soil texture, anything else that might potentially be in there that would give us an indication that we might be getting close to a potential grave. So, but that is a very good question.
Can we have the daily briefings emailed to us?
I think that should be possible, doing the emailing the daily briefings. Do you see a reason we couldn't do that, Amy?
I'm seeing a few hands up in the audience right now as well. We're going to do questions from the audience through the question cards at the front table. Right now, these are questions coming from the Public Oversight Committee members in the front row.
So we're not sure yet what format those daily briefings will take, but I think we'll probably either be able to do a written synopsis or live streaming, one of the two. So we'll figure out what works best in the field, but just based on previous incidents, I think we'll have one of those two options every day. Either the video will be available or we'll do a written synopsis.
I've got a question. I know some time ago, I think, noticed it on the first day of searching the radar. There was a large hole in the ground that was near the fence, near the area that's being proposed for excavation. Has there been any explanation to why that hole was just there?
I don't believe we have a good explanation on that one just yet. said, it's a kind of a sink of some sort, like a little small sinkhole type thing, but I don't know honestly what has caused that. But, you know, if we expand the excavations out further, it's possible we may get that answer. But we're not going to be, where we're going to situate this, this current testing effort, we're probably going to be just off-center and not over that particular location.
So is this, in your professional opinion, is this like a test, or this is like the start of excavation?
So both, actually. So it is, we call it like kind of in archaeology terms, we refer to it as testing because it's an intermediate step. It's something where we're used to dealing with situations where we don't have the answers until you actually start excavating. So there's a lot of unknowns at this point in time. And so by doing this more limited scale excavation at this point in time, it is a testing because we're just, we're not proposing to expose the entire area of that anomaly, just a small portion of it, just so that we can get some additional data, some additional information, more than what we currently have, just with the geophysical information alone.
Okay. And so it's a test as far as we don't know, we have probable evidence that something is there, we have anomalies, but if we found something, it could also be the start of.
Absolutely. And so, you know, this is something that as we contemplate doing a larger scale excavation, that is a very big mobilization. So say, for instance, if we decided we were going to try and tackle excavating that entire area, it would take a lot more people, a lot more time, a lot more resources, and we could get down to the level of finding and exposing any human remains, and maybe we find out only at that point in time that this is something else altogether, that this is not, these are not remains that are consistent with race massacre victims, that it's something else maybe associated with the flu epidemic or what have you. And it would be the kind of thing that in our estimation that would be a large mobilization with having a high amount of risk that we might be wrong. And that's something that if we do this kind of intermediate step right now, we're going to get some information that should hopefully get us a little bit closer to knowing that answer if we're in the right place, so that if we are, then we can kind of regroup. It'll give us more information also to know, are we talking about, are these people that are interred within coffins versus those that they're not in coffins, and if they were just simply put in this large hole, those remains would most likely be commingled. And that takes, that's a lot more detailed effort, a lot more time and effort to excavate those remains and document those remains as opposed to if they are in individual coffins or perhaps 2 or 3 to a box. Those are very different kinds of scenarios and require different kinds of planning efforts in terms of how you would actually proceed there.
I keep hearing about the flu epidemic and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you. We cannot hear the questions, and they're so important.
Oh.
We're hearing the great answers.
I keep hearing a lot about the flu epidemic and all of that. Has there been any, I guess, categorization that you all can do to determine which is which, like what the difference would be? And also, is there any documentation that people from the flu epidemic were dumped in mass graves?
We do have indications that during those epidemics that there were mass graves, where if you have many people who die at once, rather than excavating individual graves, oftentimes it's not at all unusual that there would be a very large block that would be excavated.
I should say an unmarked mass grave.
Actually, it does happen that you can have unmarked graves. My personal experience, yes, there are those, there is evidence for that. Phoebe might be able to speak to it more from her experience as well, but there are definitely examples.
So I was speaking about, is there any historical data that suggests people who died from the flu epidemic here were dumped in unmarked mass graves?
Not to my knowledge.
So why we keep talking about it?
Because we need to be cautious and because it's the kind of thing that it is a possibility, and there are also other potential explanations for having mass graves beyond the ones that we've been specifically talking about here. Doing those test excavations, all it is, it's just basically erring on the side of caution and making sure that we can compile information and that we are moving forward with a data recovery plan that's based on data rather than our interpretations.
I understand that, but it could also be seen as a distraction. if there was never any historical documentation stating that people from the flu epidemic were dumped in unmarked mass graves, why are we still talking about it today? And especially as it relates to this.
Those are events that may not necessarily have historical documentation to say, here lies a mass grave of people who died from the flu, especially if they were relatively poor individuals or if it was considered to be a pauper grave. There might not be an expectation that there would be historical records that would corroborate that. So it's just, it is a cautious move. I realize that it's not, but at the end of the day, we feel like this is our best effort to try to amass the kind of information that allows us to put forward a more thoughtful and appropriate data recovery plan down the road.
I hear you, but it just seems very suspicious to me that we've never heard about any of these alleged unmarked mass graves, flu epidemic victims, until now we're starting to do a mass grave excavation from 1912.
And this is, and I appreciate that. There are many examples of unmarked graves, and some of those are mass graves. I mean, the example that I showed during the last presentation was a situation where it was a mental hospital. Those were completely unmarked graves, both individual graves as well as mass graves. And that was one example of many. It's an unfortunate reality that it doesn't take very long for people to become forgotten or for graves to become unmarked, and it just happens. And that's something that we're just mindful of the fact that we want to be cautious as we move forward, that we're actually looking in the right place.
Susie, did you want?
Did you want to add something there, Phoebe?
Yes, I do. I want to say remember that we do have clues we're looking for. So we're not just going to rely that there is a large feature there. I mean, I will be looking for signs of violence because we do need to distinguish other forms of ending in a mass burial other than this one event. That it is very possible to have unmarked mass burials, not just unmarked single burials. But I think our probability is good for this particular search, just because that whole area of cemetery is largely in use since the 1920s. The gravestones we can find with dates run out after the 1920s. There's just blankness. So I have great hope in this particular feature. But I also recognize that, it's not a hobby, but I do walk through cemeteries every now and then. And often they're just even nice burials that are unmarked, and that doesn't even get to the ones where it's clear that the less money you have, the more likely your burial will disappear into anonymity. And if you die in a poor state with other poor people, you get buried with the other poor people in anonymity. So just please bear with our efforts to not jump to a conclusion that they'll be the ones, or there'll be signs of fire and gunshot, because we won't know until we get in there.
I don't know where we are in terms of the agenda, but are we at the point number 4? So
Not yet. There's one more
Okay.
piece I'd like to have the committee talk about.
I have a question. About the looking towards the burial themselves for each person, is it in conclusion that they were actually buried in coffins, or were they just tossed in these boxes? And what would be the, you get in terms of those from the epidemic of 1918 as opposed to the ones of 21? Is there indication that those folks in 1918 were tossed in, or were they planted in coffins as compared to 1921? Were they, do you expect coffins being at that time, or just to be tossed in a hole?
And it's variable. There are examples where you have epidemics and you'll have mass death due to epidemic where people will still be interred within individual coffins. And then other examples where there is a mass grave and they're just simply laid in the grave. The ones that I have familiarity with, they were actually placed within coffins. But what we don't know also then about the massacre victims is, were they interred within coffins, or were they just simply laid into the hole? and that we had to be prepared for either of those possibilities. And those will present with different kinds of signatures from the standpoint of staining in the soil, from an archaeological perspective, the kinds of things that we would be looking at. Those will present differently and will look different as we encounter them.
Will embalming be one of those indications as well? Will embalming methods be part of the determination?
I'm going to defer to Phoebe on that one.
Yeah, it depends on the preservation, how well they're preserved just in the soil. So sometimes, because remember, for Oklahoma, I had stated at past meetings, we don't know exactly which state of preservation we'll get, and other past excavations have yielded very good versus just poor like I'm used to here in Florida where the sandy soil. But I'm hopeful for that area that we'll get the very good. If remains were embalmed, we could get excellent returns. Embalming can preserve remains even further, even soft tissue, even after the time span we're considering. Because I have recovered soft tissue on embalmed remains in an unmarked single burial in a plain state, in North Dakota, where preservation is always excellent. So Oklahoma is not as cold most of the year as North Dakota, but embalming was key in the preservation of this individual. So we'll see what happens. Usually when we consider embalming, it's not so much in terms of will we get better preservation, but what we think in terms of what method did they use and is it still toxic. So, but I don't know that we'll encounter that for this situation because the clock was ticking making the burial. So I doubt there'll be much involvement, but we'll see.
I had another one. We have an outstanding historical committee with noted scholars on it for this mass grave. I'll be curious to know if they have ever heard of unmarked mass graves from the flu epidemic. This is honestly, and especially from what you stated, there's been no indication that has been the case. I understand your due diligence, but I would really love to hear from anyone on our historical committee if in their research they have heard of any Tulsan ever say that there were unmarked mass graves of people from the flu epidemic. So if they want to share tonight, I have, this is, so that's why it feeds the argument that this is just a distraction from the actual mass graves of 1921 race massacre. Because I know the historians we have on our committee and even folks that we've talked to in the community, no one has ever said they've heard about bodies being dumped in mass graves from a flu epidemic, especially if they were white individuals, because this city has always made sure that anything negative that happened to white folks were highly documented. So I just highly doubt that you got a mass grave full of dead white people in unmarked graves that nobody ever heard about.
And what time period are you speaking of this flu epidemic supposed to have happened?
Oh, this thing.
And this was 1918, 1919, so very close in time frame, and so 2 years separated from this event. So, but this is actually a question, I would actually say this is something that is of great concern to the Public Oversight Committee, and if you all do not want us to proceed at this point, and if you would like us to regroup and talk about a different plan, that might be a question for you all to take into consideration.
With all respect, that's not the case. What we want is to make sure the narrative is not pushed on something that we have no factual data for.
Yeah.
This is a little anecdotal, but I think it's important to note that we've been talking about the Spanish flu epidemic since we first started meeting in 2018. And the reason why that was brought by our experts to the mayor and the city councilor at the very first meeting is because there are historical reasons why the Spanish flu epidemic was covered up. We were in the midst of World War I. There was a strong desire not to advertise if there was a pandemic going on in the United States. There's a great article in the Washington Post this past weekend, speaking to that. And so I think we just have to remember that, you know, through this lens of history, there are reasons why documents, things may not have been well documented. And so we're not saying that that's what this is, we're just saying that Gary's point, when we move to the next step, you know, we're doing that with the most information available to us.
And this is also just to let you know, some of these, because we have actually been having a lot of these planning meetings and contemplating this excavation for a long time, and kind of working through different scenarios and kind of if-then scenarios. So if we encounter this, this is how we would potentially approach it. And some questions in order to move forward in the most appropriate manner possible with the best information available. That's why we just took a step back and proposed this test excavation. It was not to distract, it was not an intention to detract from a larger effort. I feel, I think everybody on this team is committed that provided that we get that positive indication that we are in the right place, that we would then be coming back to the committee with a proposal for how to expand the excavation in an appropriate manner, and to make sure that it's done right, that it's done well, and with as much input from you all as we can get. So it's not with that intention at all. We're fully committed to see this through. It's just that with a lot of those questions, it was very difficult to try and game plan how you actually strategize to pull your team together, and the amount of resources that you have to have available in order to do that, the number of people, the amount of time.
But there's another question about examining the soil and what you'll be doing to determine if there are like maybe smaller objects, bullets or buttons or teeth. Can you kind of speak to how you process the soil so that? So there's, as Amy said, it was a good question. So we will be doing some screening of the hand excavated soils to make sure that we don't want to miss anything. And so it is possible, this was kind of like where we were talking about some of the material remains that can be expected in these kinds of situations. And that may come in the form of, even if we don't have the kinds of conditions that would otherwise allow for textiles or clothing to remain intact, there are going to be elements that would remain intact, and that's going to be fasteners, buttons, jewelry, hair combs, things like that. If there were coffins, then we would expect that there would be hardware associated with the construction of those coffins, and that's going to be typically like nails, and that would be the main thing we would probably be expecting to see in this particular case here. So that will be, the screening will be taking place on site as well. And so you'll be seeing some people who will be doing the excavations and other people who will be screening that soil through mesh to try and capture anything that wasn't actually maybe missed or maybe caught while they were actually observing and looking.
I was speaking to that with Amy. And what I was considering was the leaching of blood from the victims that were shot. Possibility the blood was leached into the ground. It could be within the anomaly that you have, or it could be leaching into the soil that's around the anomaly, which could be from some other location. So I'm just speaking of testing the soil as you dig to see if there's body fluids, blood, those kind of things, DNA that we could pick up to know that something more than just finding buttons and artifacts.
Sure, in terms of soil chemistry.
Just take soil samples to see what is identified within the soil.
Mhm. And maybe Phoebe can speak to that in terms of what it actually, with some of the soil chemistry.
So normally, we'll take soil samples from beneath the body or directly around it, or and by body I really mean skeleton. So there is information there that can be obtained from the soil, but for DNA, the preservation rate of the human DNA tends to be very low. There are studies that speak towards time since death, trying to time how long the remains have been there based on the organisms that live in the soil, but that kind of timing is usually for above ground organisms. I haven't seen any literature for burials. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, I'm just saying I haven't seen any literature for burials over and for this amount of time, for a century later. If we find bones and artifacts, the hairpins or the jewelry or buttons or fasteners, if we find those in association with bones, then we would try and get the DNA directly from the skeletal material if it comes to that. But say we find the fasteners in the sifted soil, well, that soil has already been thoroughly mixed by the time we see that there's a fastener there. The fastener's trapped in the sifter while all the soil is falling beneath. So on top of the problem that the DNA does not preserve well in soil, the soil itself will have been aerated and mixed with all of the soil in that general scoop of soil, that trowel full of soil or that bucket full of soil. So depending on how the bodies are arranged, we won't get necessarily a signature. But then the probability from soil is low to begin with for human DNA. It's just there are too many other organisms living in it for the time span that we're interested in. But for teeth and bones, there's good preservation generally.
Going back to the coffins in the large area, has it been thrown out of, I know there was early reports that the bodies were thrown in big boxes, like that will hold a piano in them. Has that idea been tossed out that made it and carried the bodies in big boxes and then transferred them into coffins or thrown into the pit? Does the pit itself kind of would support the idea that bigger boxes are there?
And that's actually, we've discussed a lot of those different scenarios, and part of the reason that we do that is so that we try and anticipate what are the signatures that we would expect to find in the process of excavation that would be indicative of any one of those different scenarios, whether you're talking about people who are in coffins versus not in coffins. And that helps us just prepare for making sure that we approach the excavations appropriately regardless of what those situations are, that we can then react and respond depending on what we start to uncover and find, and that we are just prepared to address that situation. But we talked through any one of those, and the thing is I wish that our jobs were, we had the ability to see in the ground and that we had those answers for certain in advance. But the fact of the matter is we won't know until we excavate, we won't know until we look. But we are absolutely being mindful of all those different potential scenarios so that, we know we're trying to be conscientious of that.
Maybe mention this a little bit from the logistics side, but one of the kind of key pieces that I want to make sure we walk away from this meeting with is what preference the oversight committee has for that oversight member during this test excavation. But we talked with Chair Alfred a little bit about having that be multiple members so that multiple members of this committee can have an opportunity to both serve in that observational role, but rotate that out. But wanted to see what this committee's preference was in that regard, and if you have a preference for multiple individuals, we'll send out some sign-up information with the times available once we have those dates and times specifically narrowed down for this committee. Does that work well for this committee, to have multiple sign-up options? For actually doing the physical observation next to the test excavation site.
So you'll send that out?
Yes. Does that work well for everyone? Perfect.
have one other question. What, access will the media have? Outside the fence with everybody else?
So we'll be setting up a media kind of observation place that will be outside the fence, adjacent to the public observation space. Okay.
Okay, we want to thank everybody for the questions, and of course, if you the public has questions, please make sure that you write those questions on the cards so that we can get them and be able to answer them after the meeting. Okay, we're going to move on with an update on the Rolling Oak Cemetery geophysical scanning. And I'm going to speak on that, and Amy's going to speak on that, but I want to speak first because I want to share my takeaways from the meeting. Tonight, I was hoping to be able to report to this committee and the public that we had an agreement in place with the owners of Rolling Oak Cemetery, formerly the Booker T. Washington Cemetery, to conduct an initial geophysical investigation on that site, as we have our other two primary locations, Oak Lawn Cemetery and New Block Park. Unfortunately, I cannot say that tonight. At this time, the city is still awaiting a signed agreement from their owner. This is particularly disappointing to me because I know how important moving forward on this work is to this committee, to the city of Tulsa, and to the community as a whole. I attended the meeting with the city officials, the owners of Rolling Oak Cemetery, and their legal representative on February 6th. And we had a good discussion about their concerns, and the city and I both discussed terms that would address their concerns while maintaining the integrity of our investigative process. I thought we had reached an agreement in that meeting and that we were on a clear path forward to move forward. The city sent a draft of that agreement to the Rolling Oak representative on February 11th, but they have yet to sign it, and so we remain at a standstill. And like I said, Amy is going to speak more to this, but I wanted to share my points. I do want to reassure the members of this committee that these ongoing challenges aren't due to a lack of action or urgency on the city's part, or the city not making it clear to them how critical this is for our city. And I want to thank Amy for all the work that she has put into this, because being in that meeting and seeing all the hearing and seeing all the intricacies that were involved in getting a commitment of this type was very eye-opening to me. And being at that meeting and being here today, not having an agreement, I can't tell you how disappointed I am. Thank you. Amy?
So just a little bit of an additional update. On February 25th, we had a really good exchange with the attorney for the property owner of Rolling Oaks. He let us know at that time that they reviewed our proposed agreement, that his client didn't have any objections to moving forward with the agreement, requested a little bit of clarification on the area to be scanned, which OU provided the same day. OU then sent their updated agreement, and we thought, okay, on February 25th, we're all ready to sign. We have not received a signed copy. We reached back out again today and just let them know that if they were able to sign today, the mayor would sign today, so we would have a fully executed agreement for tonight's meeting. I think we are, unfortunately, this attorney has to have his client's signature to move forward. And so I think we have an agreement that everyone has verbally said they're willing to sign. We just need to get it signed. So that's the update. I will say that we have discussed dates for the scanning at Rolling Oaks with the property owner. The dates that we discussed, that OU discussed with them, would be to do the scanning at Rolling Oaks April 1st and April 2nd. So a couple members of our OAS team would, during the backhoe excavation portion, they would go to Rolling Oaks and do the geophysical survey work at Rolling Oaks. And then once that was concluded, they would come back and join the full team for the manual excavation to continue. And so we're ready. We have a plan. We've got folks who are booking hotel rooms to be in Tulsa to do the work. We just need to have that agreement signed, so.
This is terrible. I mean, this is beyond laughable. This is just sheer incompetence. We have been demanding, we've asked, we pleaded since August of last year. Since August of last year, we have asked your office, Mr. Mayor, to go and look into whatever we need to do to gain access to the old Booker T Cemetery. Every meeting, we got it, or we gonna get it. The next meeting, well, we got it, or we gonna get it. The next meeting, we got it, or we gonna get it. Last meeting, we got the agreement, I got the email, we gonna get it signed. Today, March the 2nd, no agreement. How stupid do you think we are? I mean, do I look that ignorant? Do I look stupid? No. Do I look like I got a reading comprehension problem or a learning disability? Do I look that stupid, Nick? Do I look that stupid, Mr. Man? Time and time again, we do the same thing. Meanwhile, bodies are laying in the ground. Meanwhile, people are lying in the ground in this city, dead, decayed, and you are still playing politics. I don't have the words, and there's nobody seems to be alone. Thank you, Madam Chairperson, for having some sense of authenticity to this issue. I appreciate that from you. But I don't see any sense of urgency when we have people lying in the ground. We got the researchers saying that we can postpone it if you want to, as we look into the influenza stuff. I don't see any sense of urgency. Well, folks are decaying in the ground in this city. And you coming back again to say, well, we ready, we got a plan. Well, the plan ain't working. They are not taking you seriously. They're not taking us seriously. And you wonder why folks protest like me in the streets. Because you all are being too nice. And they taking you for a joke. And when they taking you for a joke, they taking me for a joke. And my mama ain't raised no food. So either, I'm gonna tell you this, I'm gonna be straight up. Either this is a waste of my time, waste of all of our time, I'll get some shelters myself, or you need to be honest with us on why we here. Is this just for the show? How can one landowner for almost a year hold up an entire excavation? And every meeting we that close. The next meeting we this close. The next meeting we this close. And nothing is done. Meanwhile, bodies of people are laying out in the cold, in unmarked graves. And you know better than I do. If these were bodies of white people, are sons of the Confederacy, are daughters of the Confederacy, this would not have taken this much time. This city finds a way to do whatever they want to do. Change the name of Take Brady back to Brady. Have MLK into that system. You do whatever you want to do. But you can't do this. never had the opportunity to be, still lying out there. So if this is how you all operate, I can no longer be a part. If this is how this committee is going to be done, every meeting we get the same, how about this, how about this, how about this? The next meeting we don't have an agreement, just have our resignation letter. Y'all probably like that. But if we don't have an agreement by the next meeting, I would rather have my resignation letter from serving on this committee signed in hand.
Madam Attorney, I want to say this. I went to that meeting with the same angst that you and the members of this committee and this community have. And I sat there and I listened to all the intricacies, the back and forth that went on to try to make sure that every party had what they needed to move forward. And I understand you're not talking about that, but I'm just saying this to you, okay? We cannot give up. I'm not going to give up, and I don't want anybody else to give up. We're here for a reason, and I want us to stay here for that reason. I know it's frustrating, but we cannot give up. And thank every one of you for what you're doing on a continuous basis. Because I know it's frustrating. I'm frustrated at times as well. But we cannot give up.
I'm very partial to this particular area. Rolling Oaks / Booker T. Washington / Abraham Lincoln Cemetery. Ever since 2001, when they was building those homes and office buildings, and knowingly disturbing over these graves, tombstones, burial furniture. Recent visit out there, the markers are missing. They've been documented. And I feel you pass them in the anger. It feels like the Peanut show. You know when Lucy had that football? Come on, Charlie Brown, kick the ball. And what happens to Charlie Brown? I feel Charlie's pain. I too feel the pain of those who are at unrest. One of the issues I have is that the so-called area to be scanned. How can you know that area now that they put all the markers of those that did have dates on them, did have names on them? I got pictures of those. Before they went in there and took and destroyed this area. At one point in time, did we get the district attorney involved? I'll talk with him. He's waiting on a call from you guys. This is a murder investigation. This is not, let's make a deal. And I think one of the hesitations that I understand maybe the graveyard owner is having hesitations that that area is known to be disturbed and they did nothing to protect it over the years. And they just thought, well, it's just a Negro grave, nobody will care. But like Reverend said, and I heard it and I said it many times, if this is a Jewish cemetery, it will be held to pay. If there's a Native American grave, it will be held to pay. But those who did the developing out in that area said it just Negroes, let's get paid. And they still getting paid. I think we need to take it up a notch. The deal is over. Let's get the district attorney involved, let's put the county involved in this. You know, this is much bigger than us. And the whole world is looking at Tulsa, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Mr. Mayor, I applaud your works on this matter. I know that this is something that has never been touched in 99 years of other mayors that wouldn't even touch this issue because of this issue. But now it's on our behalf, it's on our watch to do the right thing while everybody is watching Tulsa. Thank you.
All right, there are no other comments. We're going to move on to presentation by the Muskogee Creek Nation Preservation Office, please.
Good evening. My name is Raylan Butler. I'm from Muskogee Creek Nation. I'm the manager of the Historic and Cultural Preservation Department. I'd like to thank the City of Tulsa and the mayor and the Public Oversight Committee for allowing 3 tribes that have interest in Tulsa to join the committee. The Osage Nation, the Cherokee Nation, and the Muskogee Creek Nation. Also, members of the community that encouraged us to participate. There's a lot of history in Tulsa. Actually, the founding of the city and the naming came from the Muskogee Creek tribe. And so we joined not to prohibit or to hinder any of the investigation. We just wanted to come and we want to be respectful and help the community meet its goals. We just wanted to make the committee and the community aware of some tribal history related to Oak Lawn Cemetery. I'd like to talk about Tugabuchi. He's and also acknowledge that his descendants are here in the audience. I'd like to thank Tatiana Duncan and her mother for being here. Tugabuchi was one of 23,000 Creek citizens who were forcibly removed from their homelands in Alabama and Georgia by the Indian Removal Act in 1830. Tugabuchi was born in Alabama. He traveled as a teenager on the Trail of Tears to Indian Territory. With his tribal town and his family, known as the Lochaboga. The Lochaboga settled the Tulsa area close to the Arkansas River in 1836 at the present-day intersection of Cheyenne Avenue and 18th Street near Riverside Drive. Today, this is known as the Council Oak Tree, and it's at the Creek Nation Council Oak Park. The Lochaboga named the settlement Tallahassee, which is short for Tallahassee. Many people know Tallahassee, Florida. That term comes from the Creek language meaning old town. Later became Tulsi Town and then transitioned into the term Tulsa. So Tugabuchi, I want to make one correction. It stated that he was the second chief, and through further fact-checking before the presentation today, there was another Tugabuchi that was second chief. It was a common name in that time period. The Tugabuchi we're referring to didn't have a last name. This was before we had English names in our tribe. He was a very important leader, though, for the community. He was a medicine man for Lochaboga tribal town, and he was an original Alati. So when the Creek Nation lands got divided and assigned to citizens, his 160 acres is right off of present-day Gathering Place Park. His land was at 31st in Riverside, between 31st and 21st, and the Maple Ridge neighborhood. He died in 1910. He was over 100 years old. He was known as one of the oldest Indians to ever live in Tulsa. So, why is this important? Well, he was buried on his family allotment at where the Gathering Place is in Maple Ridge neighborhood. And after he died, his family, his granddaughters received the land. They were deemed too young and were given a white guardian to take care of them. The guardian sold their land, and the new landowners began to develop the property, and they found a family cemetery. In the family cemetery, we found a Tulsa World article, and after talking to the descendants, that they relocated the family cemetery to Oak Lawn Cemetery, about 200 feet from where the test excavations are going to take place. By 1917, about 7 years after he had been buried, they dug up him, and we thank the rest of the family to move to Oak Lawn Cemetery. The family cemetery, when we got in touch with the family, they indicate that it was reburied in Section 12, Block 111 at Oak Lawn, and that the records show that only 12 graves were reburied, and today there's only 7 headstones. So we don't know exactly where the remaining or unmarked graves are, and we have concerns that they could be anywhere in the area and could possibly be uncovered during the test excavations. And so this uncertainty to where Togabuchi's ancestors are has led us to request that we at least be present during the excavations as a monitor in case things come up and we can try to identify whether they're Native American burials that are buried there. The committee hadn't really vocally considered, or not to our knowledge, that there could be Native American burials encountered during the excavations, and we think it's important that this information be known so that everybody's aware of the multiple histories that happen in this area. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you for coming, and I'm glad to hear your family history. But I want to tell you mine. I am a direct descendant of a Creek freedman. Jesse Franklin, my great-grandfather. He represented the Canadian colored town as a representative in 1874. 1867 to 1875. In 1874, my great-grandfather was appointed to be a judge, and he was the first African Creek judge within the Creek Nation. His body is buried at the Oak Creek Agency Cemetery. And as you know, freedmen was kicked out of the tribes in 1979. And I want to ask, are there any Creek freedmen who were citizens of the tribe until 1979 that is protected by the Creek Nation and Federal Indian Graves Protection Law? And I also want to ask, does the tribe have any proof that Togabuchi's actual body was moved from its original grave to the new site when the monument was relocated?
To answer your first question, you're correct. To be a citizen of the Muscogee Creek Nation, the Constitution says you have to be Creek by blood. And so the Constitution changed in 1979 with those updates. And so individuals that could not prove that they're Creek by blood were no longer part of the tribe. So descendant communities or lineal descendants have rights under NAGPRA law, which is the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. And there are instances that we're aware of that when Lake Eufaula was being made, that cemetery relocation included Creek freedmen cemeteries. And so we do have some documentation in that area where cemetery may have been relocated, and we can talk after about that. In terms of the knowing whether Togabuchi was actually moved, we do not know. We are working with the family to try to do, our tribe has our own GPR or scanning capability, and we have machines, and we're going to try to do our own survey just on that block to see if we can identify unmarked burials within that section. Unfortunately, the area where we think the family cemetery was located in a Maple Ridge neighborhood is in somebody's front yard, and we'd have to probably deal with a landowner like Rolling Oaks to get permission to do that kind of investigation, to see if people actually got removed or not.
And I also, thank you for your answers, and I also, and I want to be sensitive to your history as well, and respect, you know, with respect that you have sensitivity to ours. And Tuckabachi, he owned slaves. We were slaves coming on the Trail of Tears. We were property of the tribes and within the Creek Nation. And so I'm having a hard time sitting here as you are requesting to be a part of a process that we have known. You see how we're treated. You see how we're treated, and my family was kicked out of the Creek Nation tribe in 1979. And then I have to be a part of something to grant you all access to make sure that your descendants is okay. And nobody is checking to make sure that mine is okay. And my great-grandfather served the Creek Nation. He served the Creek Nation. And my family descendants are owed a lot from the Creek Nation. We are fighting for our citizenship that was taken. And you stand here.
Out of respect, and I'm not here to
I understand
anybody's history.
I understand that, but I just want to make that clear because this is a very sensitive topic for us, as you see. And we're trying to get justice for our ancestors there in that ground as well. And this is the Oversight Mass Graves Committee for the 1921 Tulsa Massacre.
But you can't just dig up anybody. Culturally, it's very disrespectful to do that in our culture. So it's really hard to.
It's disrespectful to ours as well. And I'm not trying to be rude, but it is disrespectful to ours as well. And you said that the site that you believe that your ancestors are is 200 feet from where we're from.
Right, because
we're
not sure where these other graves were located, and it could be a possibility that they're uncovered during the excavations.
I just want to say, I think this space should be for what we're doing for the mass graves community. Period. Sorry.
I just have one little historical question. You can help me as far as the timeline, as far as the creek coming here to what we know today as Tulsa. What role in the timeline was Josiah Perryman a part of this whole process? I believe that he's the founder of Tulsa Town, which we know today as Tulsa. So what role does Josiah Perryman play in the whole historical aspect that you just shared with us?
The Perryman family plays a big role in the founding of Tulsa, the settlement, you know, the street names. So there's a lot of history there. I'd have to do some more digging to help answer your question directly, but I'd be happy to do that after.
Comment. It wasn't Josiah, it was Benjamin Perryman who settled here along the vertebrae in 1828, along with his enslaved Africans. It was his grandsons that you're referring to, Josiah and others, that became prominent founders of this town. But it was Benjamin Perryman, not to be confused with his kids and grandkids. You understand? But they've been here since 1828. And that was a few years before the Indian Removal Act. The Creek Nation wasn't even, surveyed until 1833. The Removal Act was in 1830. The treaty to remove us was in 1832. But many of the, some of the Creek families who were prominent in the South decided to move on their own, that they legally being in cohorts with selling Georgia. They got in trouble, so they came this way. So the point that should be made clearly is that we have a century of history here before the white people got here. Along this area, this was an area that Creeks lived, and their enslaved Africans, and then their enslaved Africans become tribal members in 1866. So those people had to die and be buried somewhere. And also, you talked about, this guy had a question, Reverend Turner had a question about the flus. We've had a number of incidents that happened in the Creek Nation where masses of our people died. My great-grandmother, Susan Grayson, and 3 of her kids died in 1900 of the flu. We don't know where they're buried. We know where the rest of the family is buried, because they lived to be buried. But when, during the Dawes Commission, it's reported in the Dawes Commission that 1/3 of the Creeks had died during the process of the Dawes Commission. 1/3 of them. And if they were living between 1898 and 1906, they got 160 acres. They just had to be living during that time. So at the end of the roll, they knew 1/3 of those people had already died. And they had to be buried somewhere. So the tribe is just saying, this isn't just a black and white layer history here.
And we're not trying to hold up any process. We just want to make everyone aware of the additional history. And, you know, I apologize if it offended anybody. We're just trying to make sure everything is open and clear, transparent.
I have a question, just out of clarification. So, when you first spoke, you stated that you, at the least, want to serve as monitors
Yes.
during the test.
Yeah, we want to provide a monitor from the Creek Nation.
What is the most?
We have to, you know, if it is true that they uncover Native American burials, then, you know, that's a different conversation.
Well, let's talk, what is that?
That would be, you know, involve the physical investigation committees in the city of Tulsa, and what jurisdictional rights does the city have to continue to excavate a grave that isn't what they think it is.
Okay, so thank you for sharing. So basically, I hope the community is hearing all of this. Yet again, another possible barrier in the excavation of the mass graves from the race massacre of 1921. This time from the Muscogee Creek for a chief who owned slaves. The second time was from when I mentioned about the investigating of the flu. And the third is one that's a separate site, but still about the mass graves, the Rolling Oaks. And so it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that we are coming with more obstacles. The month before, we're supposed to just do the test. Then we are solutions. And I find that very problematic for a committee that it is supposed to be as our mission to excavate mass graves from 1921. It seems like we're finding more reasons not to than we are to do.
I have a question. This is to the mayor. I was told that this is a murder investigation. So if it is, then what rights do we have to, I mean, as a city as a whole, we should have free to do whatever it is we need to do. Because it's like as a murder investigation, we're basically limited as to what we can do. I worked for the Dallas Police Department for 32 years. I drive here every month to be at this committee to see what's going on. But I'm like the Reverend. What I hear is more cover-up than transparency. I'm like the Reverend. I basically don't want to waste my time to be part of a committee that's going nowhere. Like I said, I'm hearing more roadblocks than anything. And I'm trying to stay positive, and this is supposed to be open and transparent. But obviously, it's not headed that way. And like I said, at the beginning of this, the mayor stated clearly that this is a murder investigation. He would do whatever within his power. But now I'm limited because I want to know what are the powers of the city of Tulsa if this is a murder investigation. So can you answer that for me?
Sure. I want to differentiate two things, and tell me if I'm wrong. What the Muskogee Creek Nation is saying is simply that as you're doing the test excavation, because we believe that there are Muskogee Creek citizens buried in proximity to the test excavation site, that we want to be involved and be able to monitor that progress. And if you find out that those are Muskogee Creek citizens, then we retain the purview to decide how things move forward relative to their remains. Is that what you're saying? You're not trying to stop.
That discussion would be with the descendants who are here.
Right.
You know,
but you're not, I just want to make clear, you're not here to try.
No, we're not here to hinder
anything.
We're just committing to be involved in the intermediate step.
Okay, I wanted to.
As an observer.
Yeah, right. And
because this history wasn't told or part of this, and it's an important, it's another unknown that needs to be known.
So I completely agree with you. On the murder investigation side, we are still approaching it that way. The challenge is that this is a murder investigation that's 99 years old, not a week old. And with that come legal issues that I'm happy to visit with you about after this meeting. I don't want to get into right now. When the person that we may have those legal issues with might be watching this on TV.
There's no timeline on the murder investigation, correct?
That's correct. But we are, that's why we're focused on this. All of our legal options remain on the table on this. And if I, for a minute, think that we're not making progress on getting a resolution on Rolling Oaks, then we will follow through on our other options.
Mr. Mayor, you said the same thing.
No, Reverend, I listened to you talk for 2 minutes. Please let me talk.
You said the same thing in
Let me
August.
talk.
With the subpoena.
Will you please let me talk? This isn't a debate. We're all on the same, we all want the same thing here. I know you don't think we do, but we do. The issue here is one of timing and balancing that with our legal ability to get things done. And I know that there isn't a single person in this room, I'm going to imagine, who's happy with the progress that's been made in the last month. The progress has been made in the last month. And we have a plan to move forward. We have the property owner's lawyer telling us that they're on board. We just have to get that signature and move forward in April. And we will continue to work on that as best we can. And again, we're keeping all of our legal options on the table. That remains at our purview and our ability to follow through. So, to your question, are we making progress? Well, I know we're spending a lot of time tonight talking about Rolling Oaks. In about a month, we'll be further in this investigation than we've ever been in Oak Lawn with this test excavation to determine what's there. And I also want to make clear, whether it's the discussion with our colleagues in the Muskogee Creek Nation or it's relative to the Spanish flu, the test excavation in Oak Lawn is proceeding. Nothing is derailing that. I think the point that's being made is simply, we don't know what's down there, which is why we have to do a test excavation. That's the point of it, is to determine what's there, and then hopefully once we know, then come back to this group and determine the right way to move forward. but we are making progress. I know that it seems slow and gradual, but it's because we want to do all of this the right way. We don't want to get mad and violate the law. We don't want to rush something that shouldn't be rushed. And so we will just keep putting one foot in front of the other and proceeding forward, which we are doing. And I get the frustration.
What's our rights as a city, if it's a murder investigation, that we have to be able to move forward?
And we are.
But what's our rights? It's like we're dependent on other people, like I said. If this was eminent domain, they would have had whatever property they wanted and moved on forward. So as I watch and I see this, you know, I work with city attorneys. I mean, matter of fact, we should have had our city attorney here to explain the process to us and exactly. It's a matter of having that individual sit at the table and saying, this is what we're demanding. And if he doesn't do it within an ample amount of time, then as the city of Tulsa, we're going to move forward and do what we need to do with or without you. Because here's our rights, being that this is a murder investigation that's been over 100 years, there's no limit of statutation on it. But we're sitting back and we're playing nice guys, which, because like I said, you know, I'm city of Tulsa. This is based on the rich versus the poor, black versus white. They know what's out there. So I even did some research. The former mayor had some input in that property as well. So, like I said, how can we get with the city attorney to put the pressure on them to go on to the next step? We're just sitting here playing nice guys.
Mr. Mayor, the city attorney has been in those meetings with them, with the chair and with Amy and other.
Has he ever been here to explain it to us?
No, he hasn't come to these.
But we're here to do a third
runs
party.
with the property owner to make sure that they understand that we do have our legal.
Have you explained
rights.
to the city attorney what's the word I'm looking for, to get this done in an expedient manner?
Repeat. Yes.
Well, Mr. Mayor, back in August, you stated about the Rolling Oaks and that we will get something done. And if we need to subpoena, this is your words, we will subpoena. But we want to do it the other route, getting their permission, because a subpoena would take too long. I don't know how a subpoena could take longer than 8 months, because it's March today. Second thing, if this is a murder investigation, as I stated from the very beginning, where is the evidence that was turned in to the Tulsa Police Department back in 1973? I've asked you about that in every meeting we've had, and it's always been, I talked to the chief, that's when it was Chief Jordan. He said it was 40 years ago. And we still, that's not even on the agenda, have heard anything about that today. And as you cut her off, as she was trying to answer your question, she did state if they do find the remains of this individual, then they will have to look at their jurisdiction versus what the city has. And that could complicate matters.
Right. Sure. But they have their right on behalf of their descendants to do that.
Absolutely.
That's my point, but they're not trying to derail our.
But it could possibly do that.
There are lots of things that could possibly.
But that's not what you're looking
Could I break in a second? I'm sorry. Can you guys still hear me? Can I break in a moment?
Yep.
Because, I'm sorry, I'm going to time out here. I get the anxiety. We're not trying to cover anything up. We're just not. We've made great progress, and as a member of the Fiscal Evidence Committee, I assure you we are 100% on board with finding these individuals, finding our dead. And the representative from the Muskogee Creek Nation is not interfering. I have worked on past excavations with a native observer, and they do literally observe and give instant advice instead of having to run around and ask, what do you think this artifact is, or is it an artifact, when preservation issues are at hand. I prefer to have an observer there. The reality, however, is that we could find remains from any individual while trying to get down to the level we need for our test pit. That's just a consequence of cemeteries and any burial we run into, no matter how African descent or European descent the individual may be. Any burial we run into while trying to get to the edges of our test pit will cause a delay. But finding such a burial does not mean we're not 100% on board. We're 100% on board. And mainly because I'm probably going to leave before you can make a reply, I'm just going to say two things. This event is streaming. I, for one, would not be surprised if part of our difficulty with getting a signature has to do with watching the response every time this committee has to report we don't have that signature. I'll just put that out there. And then the second thing is, man, I'm so annoyed by that first one, I lost my train of thought. But please give us the benefit of the doubt. The mayor, Amy, your physical evidence committee, we're not trying to jerk anyone around. We're just not. You know, we're just not interested in that. I'm not saying that does not happen, but we are not cats playing with you mice. So please recognize our progress. Oh, now I remember, that evidence from the police office, that is triple hearsay to us. Triple, meaning it may never have existed. It's a report from a possibly disgruntled ex-police officer. We have no physical indication that stuff exists. We can't squeeze information out of anybody. We're not going to get them. But we do have enough information from reliable people and their narratives to go forward with the scenes we have. And we've been doing that and we'll continue to do that. So I've been watching this stream. I do think we may have an issue with the streaming versus the response rate on the signature. And I'm just hoping after this we will eventually get a signature. But we have a team of the size where we can handle Oaklawn for now, and if we get the Rolling Oaks one in a little while afterwards, then we won't have to deal with excavating dueling. Okay, well, I'll try and linger for a moment longer, but I had to get that in there. But I do respect your opinions. I just want to reiterate, we're not jerking. We're just not.
The one other thing I would add on the subpoena issue, I'll just be totally open. The challenge on that, and with it being 99 years old and getting a search warrant or anything else, is we can pursue trying to get the agreement with the property owner, which we believe we essentially have. We just need them to sign the document, the contract. And if we can't get that, we can pursue the search warrant and move forward on that track. The challenge of that is that we're trying to get a search warrant on a scene from 99 years ago, and we could lose in that before a judge. And if we lose before a judge on that, it's over. There is no search at all.
But Mr. Ross has so much documentation to show.
And I hope that the judge would agree with me. But what I've learned the hard way in dealing with courts is that it doesn't always go the way that you think or believe it should go. And so I'm trying to minimize our risk by getting this resolved amicably, even though it's taking more time than any of us would have wanted. Those are the things that we're trying to balance and doing it the way that we're doing.
Greg?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, he had a question over here.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. It's not really a question. 3 months ago, when we started doing these, there was a question about a warrant and why we couldn't get it. Why we couldn't go to a judge. Correct me if I'm wrong, for those of you who are familiar with the case. Back in, I believe it was 1988, somewhere around there, there was a survey done in that area for that particular cemetery. They did not find what they were looking for. And in specific, they were looking for unmarked graves for the 1921 massacre. Because they did not find any evidential, what is the word I'm looking for? Thank you. Because they didn't find the evidence they were looking for. As it was presented to us here, if that was, again, like Mayor Bynum said, taken to a judge, that could be automatically overruled because it's already, the judge could look at it and say, look, they've already been out there, they already did the survey, they didn't find anything, you're dismissed.
And they were pointing in the wrong direction.
Okay.
Maybe so, and I'm not disagreeing or anything like that, but the very logistics of what happened then versus now, that's why they're having trouble with the warrant issue, that's all. And it was already presented to this committee 3 months ago. Thank you.
I want to just level set us just a little bit in terms of tone. First of all, white people did Native indigenous peoples wrong. White people have done black people wrong, and they continue to do. We cannot, and there have been wrong done to black people by the Native American community as well. But we aren't going to get to the space where this same conversation and these sorts of wrongs aren't happening in another 100 years if we don't at some point show an example of how we should treat ourselves as actual brothers and sisters. So with that being said, I think an understanding of where actual frustrations are coming from needs to be had. So we can't get frustrated with the descendants of peoples in this community who have been ignored for years with all of the data, with all of the facts, with all of the anecdotal stories, with bones being dug up out of grounds to put houses over, right? We can't get annoyed when, no matter who we are, when there's a sense of urgency coming from them. We can't. I'm saying that as somebody whose father died before he ever got to see this, fighting for this moment. That's a level that we need to set at. Before we get annoyed that our jobs are a little bit more complicated, or we get a little upset that people are being so demanding of us and we feel like we're giving 100%, we need to realize that there are people who gave 100% who aren't here anymore, who will never get to see what they should have gotten to see, which was justice. That's a level that we need to be able to set, right? Because on that same token, it is true that we need to make sure that there are monitors there from the Muskogee Creek Nation. That's absolutely true. Because if the shoe was on the other foot, we would want that same courtesy. So no, we're not going to lean on what was done to us so we do it, and we're not going to do that because we already know what cycle that goes to, right? But we are going to ask for the respect from everybody in this situation to allow us to grieve a little bit in public, to allow us to express our trauma a little bit in public, to allow us to express the urgency of the moment a little bit in public, right? Because at the end of the day, it's our sacrifices, our being run over, our humility, our dependency on the love of Christ that is even allowing us to be sitting beside people whose descendants did this to us. Then we have to level set and say, look, Mr. Mayor, regardless of maybe what some of your family members have done, regardless of where some of your stances are on other issues, you did put this committee together. Amy Brown and Nick Doctor, regardless of some of our frustrations that we have in terms of urgency and that back and forth that we have, you are charged with getting this done with us, right? To the Physical Investigation Committee, when a question could be asked of, do we have all of the tools at the table and at our disposal? The question, it may be yes or no, but we are in this together, right? There does have to be grace granted because of that. But what I'm saying is that when every one of those different factors is putting their interests and their feelings above the other, we're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to be unified and kumbaya in this moment because a great wrong has been done, right? But can
can we have a sense of peace in that we are trying to right a wrong? And so in doing that, it's not only important what we do, but it is critically important how we do it. And so what I ask of the city is present with the same urgency that you know the people you're presenting to are going to have about the issue. So if you're frustrated, don't wait until Dr. Turner has to give us a sermon from Vernon AME, right? Give the sermon beforehand, right? The same is true with the issues with the Native Americans. As much as the reason y'all are on this committee is because we listened to people like Eli Grayson and went and asked our city officials, you know what, go get them, because this is that important. So it's not that we don't understand or that we're not there, but think about the situation that just happened. You're asked to give a presentation on something about where you're coming from, and the people that's on this committee feel like they're still being shut out of conversation. So that's where that frustration is coming from, right? And so I want to make sure that we get that. Let's not fall into the same traps that got us in the situation that we're in. And when you think about what can get you in a situation where there's 100 years of cover-up, 100 years of I don't care enough, 100 years of that's somebody else's problem, then we have to constantly ask ourselves through this process, am I thinking about the other person in my comment? Am I thinking about the other person in my approach? And that's where I'm going to leave that. But I think all of us have that responsibility. And so it's not fair to people who are fighting for folks who they know will never get to see this. We're fighting to rest easy in our hearts. It's not fair to come and say, just give us a little bit more time in that way, right? And that's all I want us to think about. If we put ourselves in each other's shoes, what is the passion? What is the urgency? What are the tactics that we will use? Because I think if we do that, then it'll be more fair to ask people to listen with more open ears and be more understanding. That's where I'll stop.
Can I say something real quick? Sunday I was at a predominant white church. They asked me to come because they wanted to talk about reconciliation, because they didn't trust our city to do the job of the mass graves, healing, helping the city heal. And they asked me a question and said, Sherry, do you ever think that? And they were white. They said, do you ever think that white people in Tulsa will feel the guilt and the shame enough to do right, to right a wrong? This is a black and white thing, whether people believe it or not. White people, because of jealousy and hate, destroyed a whole community. A community that was forced to build their own community because white people didn't want them over across the tracks. So they were forced, and because they were forced to build and they became so prominent, something that we could be so proud of. Our heritage was stolen from us. Our culture was stolen from us because of jealousy and hate. I'm 50% Choctaw and 50% black. But I'm seen as just black. And I'm proud to be black. We can't even get a grocery store from this city. If you go and ride from Archer all the way up north and you see what 99 years that this city has not done anything. They have not apologized I had a church say, Sherry, we are sorry for what our ancestors did to your people. It hurts me to my heart to have to tell my children that we live in a city that doesn't care enough about us. I see our city council fighting every day. She's in my office saying, Sherry, do this, Sherry, do that. She's fighting for a grocery store. We got our county commission trying to put an extension in our historical Greenwood district that we can't even get on the National Registry because we have all kinds of people standing in the way. The oldest district. We got everything popping up as districts. Pearl District, Cathedral District. What is that? And we can't get a nomination for the Greenwood, historical Greenwood District? What's the fear? Why is there still fear amongst white people that black people would succeed? Do you not think that we should succeed? I'm a Christian. I love everybody. But my people in this city have been hurt. And I have children to explain to them why white people hate you when they love white people. Why you're not accepted. Why we can't get those 2 buildings down there that's left. Why the city can't say, hey, let's pull together. We can build a whole park and say that's going to heal our city. A whole park with millions of dollars. And we can't get a grocery store. That's why we don't trust the city. Man, I care a lot about you. I respect you. But when we sit here, I sit here, time away from my family, coming in here, time after time, having hope. I respect everybody in here. Pastor Turner is a preacher. He's going to do all kinds of laying down on the floor. He might jump on a chair and do all that. He is very passionate about his people. Amen. He's very passionate about what happened to his church and the ancestors here. I have a Chamber of Commerce, Black Wall Street Chamber of Commerce. We're doing everything in our power to make sure our community, we don't get one dime from the city, to make sure our community thrives again. We have all kinds of crazy entrepreneur programs and all kinds of stuff popping up that's not making much sense. We're giving people money to come in here and teach us stuff, and we have teachers here. It's a history lesson that everybody in here needs to know. Everybody has their history and culture. We're trying to gather ours up and teach our kids, and we keep getting slapped down. But every time that Reverend Turner goes to that city, he's fighting for something that we shouldn't even be fighting for. But we do. We get up every morning and we go to our jobs and we're teaching our children and we're in the community trying to find home, trying to find money, trying to find development, trying to do something. And we got a whole big old park gathering place that doesn't mean black people don't go to parks that much. We might go to a park and have a barbecue one time and then we might not see it again to the friend reunion. We don't frequent parks like that. So it's not going to heal us. We don't really care about renaming streets when the right hadn't been made right. The wrong hadn't been made right. That's just a simple thing. Humility is what we're looking for. Humility. Christ will make us change. If anybody in here confesses to be a Christian, then your DNA has changed. God looks at us, at all of us, as men. Not by gender, not by color, not by race. But how we look at each other and how we treat each other is a horrible shame. The whole world is looking at us, and we don't look good. And 1921 anniversary centennial,
Tulsa still is not gonna look good. Because you can't put lipstick on a pig. We don't have enough time. We are a year, little over a year, we don't have enough time to right that wrong. A history center ain't gonna do it. Pillars that bring you into a Greenwood district that's not even nominated as on the historical registry ain't gonna do it. You know what's gonna do it? Is when this city, and Mayor, you're the elected leader of this city, when this city comes together and say, we were wrong, and we gotta make it right. One man, owner of some property, he's positive. He don't want to sign that. Somebody probably told him, don't sign yet, don't sign yet. I don't know. But we got to change. And if we don't change, this city is going to go on the map. This was the only place that in the America bombed its own land. Here in Tulsa. That's unheard of anywhere else. And we're just flossing around here like, come live in Tulsa. I would not encourage anybody to live in this city of Tulsa because I'm ashamed. When people say, are you from Tulsa? They're like, why y'all black people ain't out there doing nothing? Why y'all not getting out there protesting and all that kind of stuff? And I'm like, we are. You just don't see it. But you see all kinds of stuff. We're visiting cities, trying to make this city something that it will never be. Because there's a black cloud over this city. Because this city has not done right by a people. And that's the African American black race.
I want to thank everybody for the comments. Thank you very much. And in the essence of time, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to start having, basically going over the comments or the questions that we have tonight. Nick, is this all?
Any other questions?
First question we have is, what are you going to do about the known graves that have been dug up at BTW of Rolling Oak Cemetery? And how can that cemetery sell plots bought back in the 1940s? Do we know what can be done if we do in fact find bodies there? Or the bodies that have already been dug up? Carrie, can you answer that question?
So with the remains that have been exhumated or removed from.
Hold on, we're going to get Mike.
That question was referring to a lot of the work that Kevin Ross has done.
Okay.
Sorry, that question. So,
Okay, Carrie, he can ask that question, and I don't know if Carrie would have something to say as well, though, but Kevin. And the question again is, what are you going to do about the known graves that have been dug up at BTW Rolling Oak Cemetery?
Well, I know back in 2001, I did a story about the bodies. Well, let me just say there was burial furniture and remains that were unearthed while the villages of Ashley Creek were being developed in the office park in that area. Nothing was done back then during that time. And that's one of my biggest concerns and one of my biggest headaches and heartaches is that even though that was an unknown cemetery.
Excuse me, can we have everybody's attention please while Kevin is talking? Thank you so much.
Even though that this was a known cemetery, there were people that dug bodies. I mean, they planted bodies in this forgotten cemetery over the years. Even up as far as the late 1930s. And a minute, from my understanding, that area fell under disrepair during the 1950s, 1960s, when the owner, Frank Cummings, who owned the place, he had passed away. And the place went under disrepair to the point that pretty much look like the way it is now. I don't know what can be done to the bodies that are there, because now we don't know where they are. Because they, like I said earlier, they pulled up the markers. Those rusted temporary markers. They were supposed to be temporary during that time. They pulled up in no one exists. That's a law. That's a felony. And that hadn't been addressed. So I understand the person who did that, made that question, because they did have family members out there. I remember at that period of time and how frustrating that was. That's a long discussion. Again, it took 16 years to get to, no, 17 years to this point where it is that we're just not talking about it. So there's a head start from the owner of the cemetery, that what he need to do, and I'm not quite sure what all the particulars that's in that contract that we want him to sign, or what his demands are, or what he wants to see happen. I would like to see it myself. I don't know what's going to happen. I know what needs to be done. I think that whole area, race riot survivors or not, they need to be all, rescanned and identified, because now we don't know what they did up in there.
Thank you, Kevin. Do you have anything to add to that?
I'm going to ask a question for clarification. So was that at DPS, or was that at Booker T. Washington, or was that at the Abraham Lincoln?
The Abraham Lincoln area, which is behind the Booker T. Washington.
Right. So now, it was before my time, so I don't have specific knowledge, but I do know that there were reports about impacts from those neighboring developments. I do not know how they deliberated on what was observed at that point in time. I don't know any particulars on any of that. So that's unfortunate. I'm sorry that I don't have any answers on that. It is an all too common problem, and it truly is an issue. I can say that there are, as you noted, there are laws in place that are supposed to make that to be against the law, that are supposed to guard against that kind of activity. And so there are, sometimes that happens if you have unmarked graves that are encountered during development. They're supposed to stop, and there are steps they're supposed to take. And so, and I know that it's really unfortunate that's basically the whole process of how it's laid out, that they're supposed to then contact local law enforcement, the ME becomes involved, and they investigate the situation. So there is documentation that was completed about the cemetery, and it has been recorded. And because of that, it would be the kind of thing that there would be a possibility of going back out there to look at the current condition, how it has changed over time, and if there is that state of disrepair. What I can't speak to is who owns that cemetery now and who has those legal responsibilities to maintain it and so forth, but those are certainly some things that we could look into. But at this point, the Abraham Lincoln Cemetery has not been part of the discussions, but that certainly is something that I'd be happy to talk with you about later.
Thank you, Dr. Steinberg. The next question, can the city of Tulsa invoke eminent domain and public interest on Rolling Oak Cemetery in order to do a scan?
That's part of what Mayor Bynum already spoke to. That's part of what Mayor Bynum already spoke to.
Do you have anything else to add to that? Okay, we've got that question answered. The mayor has said that this is being treated as a crime scene, so if remains are found, who will charges be brought against? The city, the chamber, or individuals, or who? Do we have any answers to that?
It's an investigation, not a prosecution.
Okay.
We've got to find out the evidence first.
All righty. The next question, will there be a daily report on the local news for the general public who cannot be present for the briefings at the Tracy Park?
Yes, those are specifically designed for media to be able to attend. Yes, that is the specific intent behind those daily briefings, is for media to be able to help broadcast that news as well. We'll also be posting those, making those shareable to the city site as well.
Okay, and the last thing I have is basically just information that a person wants to share to the website. So with that, did you have a question? We'll take one more question and then we'll go on to adjourn.
No,
Did you have a question or a comment?
Actually, it was a comment.
Okay.
It was in regards to the influenza question that people have as far as mass burials go. In Oklahoma alone, between October 1st, 1918 and April 1st, 1919, in Oklahoma alone, there were 7,350 people who died. In October alone of that year, 200 people in Tulsa alone died from this disease. People caught it as early as that morning. They were dead as early as that night. The hospitals were overrun. This is how Morningside Hospital, which became Hillcrest Hospital, evolved, because Nurse McNulty came in and opened up Morningside Hospital along with the other doctors, and as a nursing hospital, in order to help aid the hospitals that were being overrun at the time. There was just too much to handle.
Okay, and thank you for that information, but basically, we know that is just one part of this conversation, and we'll basically, and I'm sorry, we'll be happy to take any information that you have. Maybe you could use the card to give us that information though, but I mean, I think we've kind of gone over there quite a bit this evening. And for right now, if you don't mind, we will go ahead and just take that information from you, and we can share it when it becomes, more of a discussion for this conversation, if you will. Right now, I want to thank everyone for your attention and your time this evening. We're going to go ahead and adjourn, but basically, another point I have is that we will not be having a meeting in April, as we will be doing the scanning at Oaklawn Cemetery, and we want to basically put our attentions in that direction. And then when we do have information to share, we will let everyone know when our next meeting will be. It's at the bottom, okay.
So I'm gonna announce that.
I'm sorry, yes, that next public oversight meeting will be May 4th, 2020. Thank you. Thank you.